Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fifth session in American English Live Teacher Development Series 3. My name is Lauren, and I'll be with you today along with my colleague behind the scenes, moderator Heather, who will be serving as moderator to help answer your questions and respond to your comments throughout the session. Today, Kate will be talking with Dieter Brun about effective strategies for teaching large classes. So let's go ahead and get started.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Kate, and you are viewing American English Live Teacher Development Series 3, and this is our fifth session in the series, and the title is Effective Strategies for Teaching Large Classes. Do you have large multi-level classes? We would love to see from you in the comments and the chat box your name, where you are teaching, and how many students you typically have in a classroom. We'd love to see that information so that as we move forward, we can be sure to address your exact context and concerns. So again, welcome everyone. As Lauren said, I'm Kate, and I'm happy to be your host and facilitator today. I work in the Washington, D.C. Office of English Language Programs at the U.S. Department of State, and I'm part of the social media team here for American English and American English for Educators. We'd like to extend a warm welcome to any first-time viewers, or if you've joined us many times, we want to welcome you too. Let us know how many times you've been to an American English Live event. So welcome, everyone. Let's start with these American English Live viewing group photos featuring teachers participating in a viewing session hosted with the support of Syed Asif Hussain, a coordinator at the Lincoln Corner in Skardu, Pakistan. We love to see teachers learning and sharing ideas as they view American English Live sessions. So thank you for sending in this great photo. Please share your photos of viewing groups by emailing americanenglishwebinars@elprograms.org or by sharing your photos on social media. Make sure to tag us at American English for Educators so that we can see your photos and maybe share them in one of our next sessions. So we're nearing the end of Series 3. And after today, our last session will focus on adapting materials for multi-level classrooms. We hope you've enjoyed the topics that we've covered so far, and let us know which ones have been your favorite. So here's a little bit about what to expect. Each session is approximately 60 minutes long and is often related to a Teacher's Corner theme on the American English website. The presenter, Dieter, will present the material, and I, as your host, will ask questions and make comments as well. But we really hope to hear from you, our audience members. We really want to be able to address your questions and your comments and your ideas, so make sure throughout the session to share your thoughts. When our session comes to a close in about an hour, you will have a chance to earn a digital badge for your participation today. We're going to share a link that has a multiple choice quiz, and if you answer 2 out of 3 questions about today's session correctly, you will be able to receive a digital badge. So you must, as I mentioned, you must answer 2 out of 3 multiple choice questions correctly. Don't worry, the quiz is not too difficult. If you're able to join us for the whole session, you should have no trouble filling out the quiz. And we're going to leave that link open until Monday, November 5th at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you or a colleague want to review the recording for a while before you complete the whole quiz, you can feel free to do so. You have a few days to view the webinar and then to respond to the quiz. Once you've successfully completed the quiz, you can expect to receive your digital badge via email from americanenglish@state.gov within about a week. All right, and we have a very important announcement. So here in the US, daylight savings time ends on November 4th. On that day, we switch to standard time, which means that we set our clocks back 1 hour. So American English Live 3.6, the last session in our series, which will take place on November 14th, is still going to take place at 8 a.m. or 1 p.m. Eastern Time from Washington, D.C., but you might find that the time is a little bit different in your region. So we encourage you to please check that time zone converter link that we're sharing right now and that you can see on the screen, just to make sure that you know exactly our start time. We definitely don't want you to miss out on our final wonderful session of this series. All right, and I'd also like to share a great resource that we have on our website. Have you ever thought about starting or leading an English language club in your region? Or if you're currently involved in an English language club, are you excited or looking for new ideas that might help engage the participants? Be sure to explore the club-related resources on the American English website using the link shown here and in the comments. We have 3 online club manuals that will inspire discussions about topics that impact your learning community and its members. Each manual is more than 200 pages long, so it's got lots of ideas for you, for your members, and even for English club readers. You're sure to find a great idea, so please check it out and let us know how you have used it in your context. And now for today's session, effective strategies for teaching large multi-level classrooms. This session will explore the thought-provoking techniques for creating engaging and interactive lesson plans when working with large multi-level classes. Participants will learn effective strategies and techniques that give their students the opportunity to actively participate in class, even when they are at varying proficiency levels. By the end of the session, participants will have a toolbox of ideas for creating more dynamic lessons while recognizing that class size is not a barrier to communication and interaction. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our presenter, Dieter Brun. Hi, Dieter.
Hello. Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm great, thank you.
Good. So Dieter is the president and founder of One World Training, where he specializes in teacher education and training. He has a master's degree in both TESOL and language and international trade, and has more than 25 years of teaching and teacher training experience. He's been all over the world. You can see a list of all of the countries that he has been to conducting workshops, both educational and cultural workshops. Take a look, maybe he's been to your country, or maybe yours is the next one he's going to visit. Dieter has also served on the executive board of Colorado TESOL since 2005, including 2 years as the president of that board. So welcome, Dieter. We're so happy to have you here today.
Thank you so much, and I'm very happy to be here. And yeah, before we start, today is a special day in the United States. It's Halloween.
Yay.
So I'm actually not Batman, but I'm welcome to the session on strategies for teaching large multi-level classes. And this is a topic that I'm super passionate about. I know that when you have a large class, I know some of you have classes maybe of 40 or 50 or 60 or even more students, that there can be some challenges. And really today we're going to look at ways that we can address this, how we can make these classes more interactive and engaging. And so I'm super excited, and thank you so much for joining all over the world. I'm excited that you're all here. So let's talk about the goals of the session. There are 3 main goals, and we'll look at the next slide here. The first one is to examine effective classroom management techniques. The second one is to promote ways to maximize language practice. And the third is to explore ways to effectively manage a variety of student levels in your classes. And I know that's kind of a big question that many of you have. So let's go ahead and get started here. I'd like to start, this question was posted, but I'd also like to, if anybody wants to add any questions now, or we can look at some that have been, but I'm curious, what are your biggest challenges when teaching large classes? And I know that there are many, but I'd like to hear a little bit from you. And so if you want to type in some responses, that would be great. Or if we have any from the Facebook or Ning
Yeah.
posting. We can
Yeah, it
also
looks like we're getting some great responses already. First of all, most importantly is that Mudasir wished us a happy Halloween. So that was nice.
thank you, Batman. Thanks you.
um, so anyways, but we do have, so let's see, Maimuna says that discipline and classroom management are her biggest challenges. Tagreed also says class management. Shuhu says classroom management and content fulfillment, which I guess would maybe mean finishing all the curriculum that you need to get through. Let's see. Faisal says students talk too much. That can be an issue. Let's see. Managing behavior. Oh, here's one. Amina says that marking the writing tasks for so many students is kind of difficult. I think a lot of teachers can relate to that.
Definitely.
Yeah, those are some of the great answers.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for sharing. If we go to the next slide, we're going to talk about our main topics for today. And I think we'll address most of those topics that you just talked about and you shared. The first one, which was, I heard a lot of comments about classroom management and discipline and all those things, is planning for effective classroom management. And again, with a large class, that can be challenging. The second one is to encourage English language use. Sometimes in a large class, it's difficult to get folks to speak English, so we're gonna focus a little bit on that. And then building classroom community. The fourth topic is fostering student-to-student interaction, which is also sometimes a challenge with a large class. How do we get everyone to communicate? And the last one is the issue of supporting different language levels. So these will be our 5 main topics today. So let's go ahead and move to the next slide, and we'll get into classroom management. And since several of you brought this topic up, I'd like to ask you to type in some responses is, what strategies do you use to effectively manage your classes? What are some strategies that you've been able to implement in your classes?
Great. Yeah. What strategies, participants, do you have to effectively manage your classroom? And looks like we still have a few folks' ideas about some of the other challenges, like giving students practice when they're everyone having practice. Oh, but let's see, we do have some great ideas. So ICPNA says having routines can be really helpful.
Excellent.
Let's see. Oh, putting students in groups from Zoe Smith. ISARS also says group work. Tagreed says using student-centered activities. Let's see. Shuhu says organizing classroom rules and learning routine, and also organizing learning routines. Great ideas. Oh, short activities. Atta says providing a lot of short activities. Interesting. Great.
Yeah, great ideas. Thank you all for sharing. And I love all the ideas. The things when we're talking about group work and things, we're going to talk about that a little later in this session. But if we go ahead to the next slide, we're going to look at some of the ideas you said. And someone talked about, I think someone mentioned something about rules and things. What I like to do is I like to have the students actually create their own classroom rules. So instead of me saying, come to class on time, speak English and things like that, I actually have the students create a set of classroom rules. And by them creating the rules, they're more, they buy into them more. They're more likely to follow them and enforce them. So for example, these are just some examples of rules that students in the past have come up with that I put here. One is speak as much English as possible, listen when others are speaking, arrive on time. I've even seen classes where when someone's late, all the students do this at the they all go like this. So the students become the enforcers of their own rules.
Nice.
Keep the classroom tidy, raise your hands when you have a question. So these are just a couple examples, but having some rules in class is usually a great idea, especially when you have a lot of students, and this helps a little bit with the classroom management piece. And if we go to the next slide, somebody mentioned classroom routines, and what I'd like to ask the group quickly, if you have an idea, is what are some classroom routines that you use in your classes already? I'm sure that a lot of you have some great ideas of things you're already doing.
Yeah, I saw one from Anva that I think is a routine where she says hello and the students say yes. So maybe that's at the beginning of the class and just sort of something that gets them started.
Yeah.
So great idea. What other routines do you have? Ahmad says that he has a stop signal. Um,
Okay.
Great idea.
Awesome.
Let's see. Oh, Alejandra says that she likes to open the class with movement, dancing or singing. That sounds fun.
That sounds great. Yeah.
Yeah. Or Azhar says starting with like a certain activity, maybe sort of a similar activity every day.
Okay,
Or
great.
great ideas, everyone.
Yeah, those are all fantastic. And I love these ideas about starting the classroom a certain way. There's a class I used to visit and bring teachers who are training to be teachers in. And every day the teachers started with that the students would say, "What day is today?" And then the students would say, "Today is Wednesday, October 31st, 2018." This was a very low level class, but that
Mhm.
was the routine. And then they would do a quick speaking activity in pairs and things. But it kind of was a routine that sort of got them focused, and it's something that they were very familiar with. I think all your ideas are great. Let's take a look at some ideas that I have up on the screen here. You may have a routine for, especially with a large class, how do you get your students into pairs and groups? How are you, or if you need them to switch partners, how do you do that? One great thing that I've seen that I love is when they're in groups and you want them to do something, you say heads together and everybody leans forward, they put their heads together, they do whatever they need to do. So just little routines like that can help manage large classes. Another thing is, I think it was Ahmed who said he has a stop signal. How do you get the students' attention when it's time to end an activity or switch partners? I personally like to use clapping. I tend to clap and that gets attention. I've seen a lot of teachers use bells or whistles or something, because when you have that many students in the classroom, if you just say, "Okay, everybody stop," I've been in classes where you can't even hear the teacher because the students are so loud. So having something that's loud, like a bell or clapping or something, is a great way so that students know, and then that becomes a routine and everybody knows that. Even something like taking attendance. How do you take attendance? What's the routine for that? Um, and I know teachers who put things on the board. For example, what's the plan for today? And that's a routine. And that way the students know what's happening that day. So any kind of routines can be helpful, especially with a large class where classroom management can be more difficult.
Great. I see a couple of people talking about hand waving or
Yeah.
holding their hand up, and the other students maybe raise their hands as well. Cieda also likes the clap, as you mentioned.
Uh-huh.
Um, let's see. Or maybe the eyes on me. Some people like to do the 1, 2, 3 eyes on me, or just say eyes on me. So great ideas, everyone.
Those are great. And even with kids, I've seen teachers do, if they're not paying attention, they'll be like, "If you hear me touch your nose, if you hear me touch your head." So
Mhm.
they have the students do something so that everybody focuses. But I think the same thing, the hands or eyes on me, all of those are great ideas. So thank you so much for sharing. Let's go to the next slide. And something I find that if you can learn your students' names, it makes a big difference because they feel like you're invested in them more. And it's hard when you have a class of 40 or 50 or 60 or even more students to be able to do that. So I think name cards are a great way. These can also be used for attendance. For example, if you keep the name cards in a certain spot, at the end of class, the students can all put their name cards into a box, and the name cards that are left over are the ones who are absent. So it's a really easy way to take attendance, and it doesn't cut into your class time. So there are a lot of ways to do this, but again, I think you can manage your class better if you're actually calling, instead of saying you say, Ahmed or Mohammed, and that way the students are actually feeling like you know them, and I think that can make a big difference. And the
Yeah, a
idea,
lot of people are agreeing with you. The embassy in Cuba is having a viewing group, I said, and they really
ah,
mentioned that they really think that that's an important part of the relationship building with teacher and student. And a lot of other people too are making comments about how important names are for building those relationships.
Yeah, and I've because I do a lot of teacher training, I've observed a lot of classes, and I find that the teachers who know the students' names, they tend to have a little more control than the ones who just point and say, okay, you. So definitely can make a big difference. So yeah, so let's move on to the next slide. And I think this is key, and a lot of you talked about engaging students and things like that. I think if you can incorporate high interest lessons with engaging activities that also address different learning styles, that's going to help manage your class because your students are going to be more focused. So, you're going to have visual learners in the classroom, kinesthetic, other learners. I find that when I don't write something on the board, my visual learners don't get it until they see it. So I always try to make sure that I'm incorporating different strategies, different techniques. As you see the picture, this is a very hands-on activity, really trying to address different learning styles and keeping it engaging, because again, with a large classroom, we want to make sure that everybody's engaged. So if we can get their interest, if we can get them doing things, if we're addressing their needs and their learning styles, we're more likely to keep their attention and to keep them focused.
That's great. So when you're encouraging us to use routines, you're not saying do the same thing every day. There are some things that we can do the same every day that just help sort of run the classroom and show students where the beginning, middle, and end are. But an effective lesson is going to be really varied, and across different days, you're going to have all different types of activities to make sure that students who learn in multiple ways have access to the content that you're sharing with them.
Exactly. And even getting, like we just mentioned with routines, we may have a routine for getting into groups, but in those groups, we might do very different things every day. So the routine kind of it helps with time management. Instead of stumbling every time trying to get groups together, we have a routine for it. That saves time, but now we can get into the specific activity. So yeah, great points. Okay, well, let's move on to the next slide. And this is a big one, encouraging English language use. And I'd like to put a question out to the group, particularly at low levels. How much English do you use and how much English do your students use in the classroom? And this is, I'd like to focus a little more on the lower, more beginner or high beginner type lessons. And so the idea is, are we able to create this English speaking environment at low levels?
Great question. Yeah. Participants, what do you think? When you have a lower level class, do you think it's possible to use mostly English? And if so, how much English do you usually use in your classroom with lower level students? And how much English do you expect them to use in the class when you're teaching a lower level group of students? Let's see, Faisal says, I use 100% English with acting.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good job, Faisal.
Let's see. Elena says more than 70%.
Okay.
Sun Ya says that they use a lot of small expressions. So I think maybe similar, maybe gestures and movement to explain. Ahmed says he uses the simplest English for that group of students. So maybe an English that's more their level. Let's see, we're seeing a lot of 60 or 70%, 75% from Ofa, 101% from Mario.
Wow, Mario. Great.
So yeah, great responses, everyone. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And I've heard kind of responses from about 50% up to 100. So if we go ahead and click here, I have a couple strategies that I like to use. And one of the things, last year I did a 5-month project in Brazil that was with 66 campuses and over 200 teachers. So it was a huge project that I was working with teachers, and a lot of them teach lower levels. And I did a survey at the beginning, and a lot of them found in their beginning classes, a lot of them were using, 50% Portuguese and things like that. And so a big part of my training was looking at how do we increase the amount of English, and how can you kind of create this English speaking environment from day one. And so I actually, and the teachers that actually did these things, and I know some of you online here also use it about 100% or close to that. The teachers that focused primarily on using English from day one, actually, their students actually improved faster than the ones who did a lot of explaining in the native language and translation and things. So, and something else that I do a lot of teacher training, and what I like to do when I train teachers is I'll teach 3 lessons in Thai using no English. And in 3 lessons in Thai, the teachers are able to greet each other, ask how they're doing. They're able to describe 8 ailments like headache, stomachache, backache. They can count to 99, and they can bargain at a market. And this is after 3 hours of Thai. And these are folks that start with 0. And I do a lot of things that we'll talk about, but I kind of like to model that if you start and really focus on trying to use just the language, for example, English, that students will, if you do everything else correctly, and we'll look at the other points that can help, you can really create, doesn't mean it has to be 100% English, but trying to move toward that direction is really helpful. I find when teachers explain things a lot in their native language, students tend to tune out when they say things in English because they're going to get the native, their native tongue version of it.
Interesting. They're just waiting for the translation.
Exactly. So if we go to the second point, which is related, this is the key right here, is speak at a level that the students can understand. Now you have to imagine I'm teaching Thai. I'm starting with people who speak 0 Thai. So if we go to the next point, it kind of includes here, but modeling using gestures. I know some of you said things like this. I have to act it out. I have to create clear context so that the students can understand. So, and it depends on the level. So if I'm teaching obviously an advanced class, I can use much more complicated vocabulary and grammar. At a very basic level, I'm doing a lot of gestures and using pictures and whatever I can to help make them understand. But it's actually possible. I mean, the teachers that I train are surprised that in 3 hours they can do all of that. The last thing we do is we have a simulation, and they're buyers and sellers at markets, and they're going up and greeting, and they're bargaining at a market and buying and selling things with only 3 hours of language instruction. So it's pretty exciting.
Neat. I just wanted, so Ulfa says that she uses very easy instruction. So I think she agrees with speaking at a level that students can understand. And also with the modeling, Luis Alberto says it's very important to use body language.
Yes.
And Shuhua says that they use English, but with slow delivery and highlighting important words. So I think these are all sort of pointing to similar strategies that you're sharing with us. So thanks again for your comments.
Yeah, great comments. And keeping in mind too, as we said, there may be times when you might need to use the native language, but we're trying to, the word on the slide is encourage. So we're trying to move toward that. It doesn't mean you can never use the native language, but I like to try to push toward using as much English as possible. And when we talk about modeling, we can model language. I can go bod hua, and that's headache, or I can go bod fan, right? I can model that way, but I can also model directions. If I want the students to do something, I can show them what I want them to do. I can get other students and model instead of talking a lot. If you think about show and tell, the focus is on show as opposed to tell, especially with lower levels. And again, with a large class, we want to make sure that we don't lose students. So if we can follow these things like, paying attention to our language modeling. If we go to the next point, we also want to create opportunities for the students to practice. So I like to think of myself as a facilitator. I give the students what they need, and then I step back and I facilitate and give them opportunities, because the more they can practice, the more they can use the language, the more they're going to improve. And finally, limit teacher talk. We're all teachers. We love to talk, right? And we love to teach.
We do.
We do. I'm guilty sometimes. But limiting teacher talk, the more the students talk, the better they're going to be. So I'm actually very aware of how much I talk in a class. And if I'm talking too much, there's a little voice in my head that tells me to shut up. It's like, wait, you're talking too much today. Because I really know that I want the students to be able to use the language. So I give them the tools, I give them the structure, and then I let them use it. So I think these are kind of some keys for encouraging English language use for those of you who are only using maybe 50 or 60% in your low-level classes. Trying to move closer and closer to 100 would really be helpful. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. And I think this is a really cool one about building classroom community. And I'd like to put the question out there to the group. What do you do to build community in your classrooms? What are some things that you implement?
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you, everyone. What do you do to build classroom community? What strategies do you put in place to sort of foster that sense that your students are part of a community in your classroom or your school? Let's see. Heba says they do a lot of think, pair, share activities. So maybe giving the students a chance to talk to each other.
Great.
Cooperative learning from ICP.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Group work from Fatima.
Mm-hmm.
Community service projects. That's a cool idea from Banish.
Great. Wow.
Might give a chance for students to do something outside of the class and get to know each other. Lots of group work activities. Olfa says conversations that she sets up, or An says setting up small groups. So great ideas, everyone.
Yeah, I love all of your ideas. And I'm going to jump through a few of these. Some of your ideas will come up again when we talk about group and work. But if we go to the next slide, there's an activity that I really like to do. It's called Things in Common. And I model, instead of telling students what in common means, I model it with a short paragraph. So here we have a short paragraph about Ming and Wei. Ming and Wei have a lot in common. Ming is a student and so is Wei. Ming has a bicycle and Wei has a bicycle too. So on. We don't have to read the whole thing, but the idea is in common means it's the same, something that we share. And that can help with this sense of community. Like, what do we have in common? What joins us? This can be done with one partner. It could be done as an activity where you talk to many different students and try to find things in common. But the main thing is finding things in common. And I usually model this. Kate, I'll model it with you. So I might ask you a question, like I might say, Kate, what's your favorite color?
My favorite color is purple. What about you? What's your favorite color?
My favorite color is blue. Right,
nope, not in common.
Okay.
Let's see, Dieter, do you like to travel?
I do. I like to travel a lot. How about you?
Yeah, I do too.
Okay, so that's a yes. Now we have something in common.
Yeah.
Do you like sushi?
I love sushi. How about you?
I love sushi too. So
there
we have some. So we can kind of model this. Now after that, the students can talk to each other and ask each other questions and really get to know each other. And this idea about things in common, I think, is a great, like I said, a great way to build this sense of community. Okay?
Great. I just wanted to share one other quick idea that I thought was cool. Shuwa says that they use WhatsApp group for communication. I think that's a great idea. That's one way to build community outside of class. And maybe you could even do this activity through WhatsApp, or something like that.
Yeah, actually, I think the WhatsApp idea is great. I've taught a lot of classes where the students have a WhatsApp group, and I'm often on the group so I can see what they're doing. And they share ideas. They ask each other questions. If they're confused about something or an assignment. So WhatsApp can be really good, and it is a great way to build community. So thank you for sharing that idea. I love that. Okay, let's go to the next one. I call these discovery activities. A lot of times we have books, we learn how to say things, how to ask questions. Let's say we're doing a session on favorites, and we have things like favorite color, favorite food, favorite sport. We can personalize activities by having the students talk to each other and learn about each other through discussions, again, making it interactive. And again, in a large classroom, we can do this too. I think this works really well. So for example, if I have a worksheet and I want to find this information about Kate, I'm going to talk to Kate. I'm going to write her name where it says Maria. I'm going to write it under. And I'm going to say, Kate, what's your favorite color?
Purple.
Great. And you might ask me, and so we'll go back and forth and fill out our sheets. What's your favorite food? And then when we finish, we'll talk to another student. So we can talk to multiple students, learn about each other. And so we're using the language in a way that helps us discover things about our classmates, which I think is also a great way to build community. We go to, this is one of my all-time favorites. It's doing leadership and team building activities. Because we're working we have a big class, we're a big team, and we work a lot in groups. A lot of you have brought up group work and things. It's really nice to talk about leadership and team building and what makes a good leader. So what I usually do is I pose the questions to the students, what makes a good leader and what makes a good team player, and they would do this in groups, so they're talking about what it is. Then once we kind of talk about leadership and team building, we go into a really fun, it's a competition. I'm going to show you 4 activities very briefly that can be done. There are other ones you can do, but basically the teams have to complete these tasks. They have to work together. They have to be a team. Some of them have to take leadership roles, and it's really exciting to watch this. So I'm going to show you 4 quick activities that you can do with this. If we go to the next slide, the first one is called the paper relay. This is a lot of fun. You can see the students stepping on the paper. The ground is molten lava, so it's very hot.
Wow.
So they need to step on the paper so basically half the students are at one end of each team, half the other. It's a relay. So these students are moving this way. When they finish, the next student will move this way. And so they go back and forth until everyone on the team has completed the task.
That looks really fun.
A lot of fun. Then the next activity that they move to is the balloon toss. This one's a lot of fun. If you notice, they're hitting the balloon backwards, so they can't see their teammates. Everybody has to touch the balloon, and when it reaches the back, the person from the back runs to the front, and then they tap it again. So they kind of go through the whole team needs to do this. And when they finish, they have to sit on the balloon and pop it.
Oh, fun.
That also signals to me that they've completed the activity.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of fun. Then the third activity is called spoon walk, and you can kind of see it. You can use a ball on a spoon. If you have limited resources at your school, you could crumple up a piece of paper or use a rock or anything else. But you have to, same thing, relay type situation where one person walks, person number 2 walks back, person number 3, person number 4. So we're going back and forth. You notice that the student on the right is telling her teammate, okay, careful, slow down. So they're really working together as a team and encouraging each other. A lot of fun. Then the fourth one is king and queen. If you have a classroom of just males or just females, you could just do king. If it's just females, you could just do queen. Sometimes I just have half the groups do king and half the groups do queen, or they can create both. But basically they get some newspaper and they have to use the newspaper to make a crown and a sword, maybe, and some clothing. So they create the king and queen, which is great. And that's kind of where this activity ends. So at the end of the activity, this activity I did with about 100 students. So at the end of this activity, you have multiple kings and queens. It's kind of a fun way to do it. And again, working as a team, at the end we debrief. We talk about what they learned, what they did as a team member, as a leader. It's really great, and it builds a lot of community, and it's also very engaging and exciting and hands-on. So I love this.
Great. Yeah, these all look really fun.
Yeah, and I've used these with kids and with adults, so it works well. I've done it with leadership and team building training for adults, and I've done it with kids and teens. So it's a lot of fun. These guys are all teenagers, and they did a great job with it too.
Great. Yeah, it looks like, so the activities are sort of to build that community and help the students really bond to each other.
Yes.
And then afterwards, you can do some reflection activities and really incorporate that language piece.
Exactly. So then they're talking about it. So they're doing it, but they're also discussing. They're using the language. So it's a great way to do it.
Nice.
Great. Well, let's go to the next slide. And this is a big one, fostering student-to-student interaction. And I know we talked a little bit about this earlier. Some of you made some comments, but what are some things that you do in your classes to encourage this student-to-student interaction. What are some things that you're able to do right now in your classes to achieve this, particularly in a large classroom? How do you get everybody interacting?
All right, yeah, let's hear from you, everyone. What are some ideas for activities you have for students to interact with each other, student to student? Let's see, a lot of people thanking you for the great ideas you had.
Great.
Olfa says that she uses role plays.
Mm-hmm.
Jorge says pair work, and Ata says pair tasks. Let's see, basic icebreakers from Sani Ya.
Great.
Shoulder to shoulder activities from ICP. I would like to hear more about that. Yeah, lots of pair and group discussions, group projects from Shuhu, playing games from Anba. Great ideas, everyone.
Awesome. I love all. That's why I like having all of you online here, because you have a lot of great ideas too. And we're going to go through several. We obviously can't talk about everything today, but I'm going to share some ideas with you as well. So thank you so much. So if we go to the next slide, one of the things that I love to do is what I call double lines. And if you see the picture here, this is from a program that I was training teachers in Senegal this summer. But you see two lines of students and everybody's interacting at the same time. And whether you have 20 students or 50 students or 80 students, double lines are a great way to get all of the students to communicate at the same time. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of walk you through how to set this up so that it's a little clearer. So on the next slide, we have an illustration of what double lines look like. So we have line A and line B. So you notice the students can all interact at the same time. It could be as simple as, hi, what's your name? It's nice to meet you. It's nice to meet you too. It could be a very simple conversation. It could be a more in-depth situation. Like we've done this before with more advanced students on networking. So you practice doing like your elevator pitch with somebody else. And just, it could be very advanced or very simple. But the idea is this structure allows all of the students, no matter how many you have, to communicate at the same time. Line A is the only line that's going to move. Line B will always stay the same. And so if you look at the left side of the line, there's a guy who's green. You see the green guy? We're going to move him. So if we go down on the line, we're going to move the green guy all the way to the other end. So we're going to take him from one end, bring him to the front of the line. Then if we click again when we're rotating, everybody shifts down. Do you see how that works? So in other words, let's call him Jose. So Jose moves to the front of the line, everybody else shifts. And as we rotate, if we click again, now we'll see that on the next slide here, that Jose now has a new partner. You see how Jose has now moved to the other side. So now we can all practice again with a new partner. And one of the things I've seen sometimes when we do just pair work is in pair work, sometimes you end up practicing with the same person over and over again. Double lines, we can rotate as many times as we want, but every time we rotate, we have a new partner. So it's a lot more interesting for the students. They're up, they're out of their seats, and we can repeat it as many times. It's a great way to practice language. And again, regardless of how big your class is, when I was in Thailand, I had a class of 40 students. I would do one double line at the front of the classroom and one double line at the back. So 20 students in the front and 20 in the back, because I couldn't fit them all in one line. But it worked great because I could get everybody communicating. And if we look at the next slide, we have this idea, okay, no matter how big your class is, you may have multiple double lines. And I know some of you might have classrooms. I know sometimes in some schools, the desks are kind of set and they're in rows and you can't move around. There's not a lot of room in the classroom. The way you can do it here is if we imagine all the A's, let's say the first row, we can have the first row of the class turn around and face the second row. Now we have two lines, and then the person can move around from the outside and come back to the other side of the classroom. So even with a classroom that doesn't have a lot of space, utilizing the rows and just making sure students can face each other, we can create double lines that way as well. Or even if there's a possibility to go out of the classroom into the hallway, lots of different opportunities, but again, great way to get everybody communicating. Another way you could do this is with inner circle, outer circle. We may have a circle in the middle and then a circle around them. And then the outer circle, click, click, can rotate. So every time you rotate, the outer circle does. Same concept, but great way to allow partner changes and to get everybody to communicate, again, particularly in a large classroom.
Great. What if Arno says, what if the students become too noisy in this activity?
Well, this activity can get noisy, but when you think about noise could mean everybody's talking at the same time. You could try to ask the students not to talk too loud, maybe have them stand a little closer together. If the students are standing too far apart, they're going to talk louder. But it also helps them really focus on their listening skills, because when there are distractions around you, if you can really zone in on the person that you're facing and really listen, it's a great listening activity as well.
Great.
So, a great question. So let's go to the next slide. And I think information gaps are great ways to encourage interaction. So this is a very simple information gap. Let's say I'm student A and this is my little chart. I know Maria, Tomas, Claudia, and Pedro. I know some information about them, but I don't know everything about them. Kate, on the other hand, knows all the information that I need. So in order for me to fill out my chart, we need to communicate. So for example, I don't know how old Tomas is. So I'll ask Kate, how old is Tomas? And if we go to the next slide.
Check. Oh yeah. Tomas is 14 years old.
Right, so we can see that Kate's paper has the other information that I need. So this is, again, a very basic one. But in a large classroom, it's a great way to keep everybody focused. They have a task and they can find this information. I've also used information gaps with reading, where there's a reading that I do about wildcats, where I put the students in groups of 3. One knows about the largest cat, one knows about the smallest, and one knows about the fastest. And so they share information and fill out a chart, but each person is an expert on one of these. So again, we're creating communication. Whether I have 20 students or 80 students, it doesn't matter, because I can put them into small groups and have everybody doing the same thing at the same time. So that's information gaps. So let's move on. I love this activity called Dear Auntie and Dear Uncle letters. In this activity, I pair students up. So let's say Kate is my partner. So Kate's female, so she's going to be auntie when I write my letter. Kate's going to write a letter to me, so I'm going to be uncle. So you play the role of the writer of the letter and the recipient. So here's an example, though, of a letter. Dear Auntie, I want to be a teacher, but my parents want me to be a doctor. What should I do? Love, Sidra. Okay, so there's a problem. And if we click, we'll get the answer. Here's this answer. So what your parents say is important, but it's also good to follow your dreams. You should talk to your parents and tell them that you will change many lives if you're a teacher. Good luck, love, Auntie. So what happens in this activity is I'm going to write a letter to Auntie, which Kate will read. Kate will write a letter to Uncle, which I will read, and we will give each other advice. And this is a great way to interact. It's great for it makes writing more fun, because now we're actually answering letters as opposed to just writing a paragraph. This can be adapted to different levels if you want it to be a little bit longer, but really fun. And it's fun to have the students read their answer, at least some of them to read them. But again, a really, really fun activity. It creates interaction. If you have 80 students and you have 40 pairs. So yeah, this is great for large classes too.
Yeah, and I see how you can really, this is another way to build community too, because the students are really getting to know each other. And maybe some of the questions that they're asking are real life questions and concerns that they have, and they can become really good friends through this activity. So this is a great one.
I have seen that too, where students actually give each other really good advice about, as you said, real problems. So it does help foster community as well. So yeah, so let's go to the next slide. Another fun thing, let's say you're teaching your students directions like go straight, turn left, turn right, it's on the left, it's on the right. Just basic directions. I think scavenger hunts are great activities where if it's possible in your school, the students have a set of directions with missing things and they have to follow the directions and fill in the empty spaces. And you can do this in groups, which is a lot of fun. But, go out of the classroom and turn right, go straight to the end of the hallway and turn left. The first room on the left is the blank. Let's say it's the library. Then they continue straight. So they're actually following the directions and completing this. And it's great. Again, they're working as a team. They're interacting with each other. And if we go to the next slide, this is something that I really love called reading relays. There are different ways of doing it, but it works great with large classes. I've even done this I did this at a conference where I had 150 people in my presentation, and I did this activity with 150 people.
Whoa.
So it's not, and I've done it with 20 students. So it really works well at all different things. But basically the way this works is I like to start with, if possible, we have a reading text, let's say an article. There's an article that I wrote about sharks. And my students make predictions. They have questions that they need to predict. So if we go to the bottom, if we click here, let's say the first question is, how many different kinds of sharks are there? 25, 100, or 350.
So this is a question you're going to ask before you show the reading, right?
They haven't seen the reading.
This is part one. This is the predictions part.
Right. So I would like all of you out there to just guess. How many do you think? Do you think it's 25, 100? Just type it in really fast. 25, 100, or 350.
What do you think, everyone? How many types of sharks are there? Looks like some people are thinking the answer is B for 100 different kinds of sharks. Let's see. What else do you think? 25 from Tagreed.
Okay.
Let's see. Looks like 100. Looks like we're getting a lot of responses that there are 100. One or two that say 350.
Great.
Okay. Great predictions.
So this is fun, right? So, but we're doing this in the classroom, and sometimes I have the students talk first, but then I'll have them raise their hands so we can kind of see, like we're doing here, how many of you think it's 25? Raise your hand. Who thinks it's 100? But this is just predicting. So it doesn't matter if they have the right answer. It's fun to see. And what I find is that for almost every question that I give them, there are varied answers. So because the students don't really know. If we go to the next slide, I can show you two other questions. One is, what is the largest shark? The whale, and we're not going to do this because I want to make sure we have enough time to finish up here, but what's the largest shark? Whale shark, great white shark, or Greenland shark? And number three is, if we can click the screen here, number three is, what is the most dangerous shark? Tiger shark, leopard shark, or great white shark? Mm-hmm. It seems like when I do this, number three, tiger shark is the favorite. Actually, the great white shark is the most dangerous. Tiger shark is dangerous, but great white is more dangerous. And the answer to number one is 350. And number two is the largest shark is the whale shark. But basically what we're doing is they don't know this yet. We're just predicting. The second part is they work in a team and they run to the wall and find the answers. So
fun. So you put the text on the wall?
On the wall, multiple texts. So if I have, no matter how many students I have, I can put them in small groups and they take turns. So if you're in my group, Kate, I'm going to answer question one. How many different kinds of sharks are there? I'm going to run to the wall. I'm going to find the answer, but all around the room, all the other teams are running to the wall too.
Oh, nice.
I'm going to run back and say 350. We're going to all circle 350. And then the second person's going to go, what is the largest shark? That's you, Kate. So you're going to run to the wall. Yes. You find the answer? Come back and tell us.
Yes. Is it the whale shark?
It's the whale shark. Yes. Yeah. So you're going to do number two. And then maybe Ahmed is going to do number three. And he's going to run to the wall and tell us it's the great white shark. So we're working as a team. We all have to circle the correct answers. It's a lot of fun. If you're in a situation maybe where paper and making copies is limited, you could have one copy for each team.
Yeah, that's nice.
But maybe the person who finds the answer doesn't circle it. They need to tell the rest of the team, and then the rest of the team, somebody has to circle and they take turns. But definitely with, like I said, 20, 50, 150. You can do this with any size group. And what's fun is that they're scanning, it's competitive, they're trying to be the fastest. And they haven't even read the article yet, but they're learning about it. So, and I've used this with different ages too, adults, teenagers. I think really, really little kids, this might be a little confusing for them, but it could be adapted maybe. It could also be just a simple thing using the wall where you have information and the student just has to find the information. It doesn't have to be the prediction and the answer, but this type of relay is just a really, really fun way to get the students interacting and having fun. And reading is often passive. This makes reading active and exciting. There's a lot of energy and it's competitive. So the students are trying to work together and do this quickly. So I love this activity.
This sounds like a lot of fun. And sometimes, it might be a little bit more fun than just sitting and circling the answer at your desk. A lot of people are commenting on how they want to use this activity in their class.
Awesome. Yeah, I strongly encourage you to try it. It's great. The important thing is always we talked about modeling early. It's important to model exactly what you want them to do. So I'll usually take some students and I'll say, okay, this is my team. I'm going to run to the wall and find number 1. I'm going to go back to my team. And then Ahmed's going to do number 2. So we make sure that we get this idea of a relay, that we take turns. And then if we go to the next slide, someone mentioned group activities and problem solving, and it could be task-based learning. But having the students work in groups, any kind of group work we can do. I love to have students have a task or a problem to solve. And again, with a large class, it doesn't matter how many groups we have, we can divide them. They can have a specific task to do. You might have a group leader, you might have somebody who's responsible for keeping track of the notes. I mean, you could have different roles if you want to, but definitely group work is a great thing. I've done a lot of problem solving activities with groups and it just really engages them and gets them going and talking, communicating. So, yeah.
Great. I wanted to insert a quick question, a couple of questions from our audience. So with a couple of the activities, people mentioned noise, and you gave us some great strategies for the double lines. But what if Eats Dina says, I don't know if I can let my students run too much in the classroom because it might affect other classes. Do you have any ideas for?
Yes, I mean, it's all about modeling. I mean, the reading relay could be walk quietly to the wall, find the answer, walk quietly back, tell your teammates quietly so nobody else can hear you, circle the answer, and then the next person goes. So it could be done in a very quiet way. It doesn't have to be loud and crazy, but it's all about classroom management and how you model it and what you want the students to do. So that was a great question.
Yeah.
And the thing is, we can always adapt to our situations. Yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
Definitely. I think it's always good for all of us to think of, okay, this is how this idea is being presented, but how could I tweak it or change it just a little bit to make it useful in my context? And then one other quick question from Juan Garcia, who's asking about two important questions, but I think I'll focus on one. What about shy students? What do you do if there's a group of shy students with an activity like double lines? Or what about if there's a little bit maybe of a cultural or even a personal, just one student feels uncomfortable talking with someone who is, they're a female and they don't really feel comfortable talking with a male. What kind of things do you do for those types of situations?
I mean, that's a great question. So the female male one, because I have taught classes where just culturally it's not comfortable for the females and males to be talking to each other. So you could have a double line of males and a double line of females. Would be one way.
Great idea.
I mean, there are a lot of different ways. In terms of shy students, one of the nice things about double lines is the shy student isn't being put on the spot. Everybody around that student is talking. So nobody's looking at that student except for the person that they're talking to. So it actually creates more of it's a one-on-one situation. with a lot of noise around you. So I find that double lines actually can help shy students because it's different than saying go to the front of the room or ask, having to speak in front of the whole class.
Definitely.
I think
Yeah,
that can
good
help a
point.
lot.
Yeah, definitely.
Another thing that I try to do as a facilitator is during the double lines when they're talking, if I know a student is weaker or a student is shy, I might stand next to that student and help a little if they need some encouragement. So there are a lot of different things we can do for that.
Great,
But
thanks.
great question. Great question. I love it. So we're kind of getting close to the end here. So I want to take a few minutes and kind of make sure we have time for our next slide here, which is kind of this program. The last webinar is going to be on multi-level classes, so you're going to get a whole session on this if you're going to visit that one. But I wanted to at least introduce this. And when we talk about strategies for working with students at different levels, because even if you have 20 students, you're going to have different levels. And in the interest of time, I was going to have you share some things, but I think we're running out of time. So I'm going to jump right in. If we go to the next slide, a couple strategies that I use, and I think this is really great, is taking stronger students and having them act as mentors or classroom assistants. The class that I taught in Thailand with 40 students, I had one student who was stronger than the whole rest of the class. His English was actually really good. He became my assistant teacher. So he had a role that made him feel important. The students liked it too because they had an extra teacher in the room. You can also pair students in some activities, maybe a strong one with a weak one if they need help. So anything, I think it's really helpful. I like this idea of, okay, I have 60 students, but I have 10 teachers in my room because I have 10 students who are stronger that I can actually use. Doesn't mean we use them 100% of the time, but in certain cases, it's really helpful to have them act in that role. So I think that's a great one. The second one is, this is kind of an interesting one where you can create level appropriate materials. So it's possible if you're doing a certain lesson, a certain context, that you create some materials for that context that are easier and some that are more difficult so that students can do something that's, and I'm going to go over this a little on the next slide in a second, but we can create, we don't have to create 5 different levels, but we can maybe do 2 versions of something, one that's easier, one that's more difficult. And if we go to the third point, it's kind of related to this. There are different ways to do this, but learning stations, that's a great way to apply this concept. So maybe one of my learning stations is a reading station, a reading station. My higher level students are going to go to one station. My lower level students will go to a different station. And these are stations where the students rotate. So some students will start at table 1, some will start at table 2, some at table 3, and they'll rotate, but I can actually make the stations level appropriate. And I'm going to go, if we go to the next slide, I'll show you kind of what I mean on this. So for example, maybe the lower level students are doing multiple choice questions, but the higher level ones actually have to write short answers. So it's a little more challenging. Or lower levels, maybe if they're writing, they just have to write a word, whereas the higher level students have to write a whole sentence. If you're doing readings, you could have the same context, but you could be a simplified versus a harder one. Listening for main concepts versus listening for details. So basically what we're doing is we're adapting the materials to the level of the students. And these are really, really good ways to support different levels in your classroom. And we're kind of reaching the end here. So I'd like to kind of wrap it up here on the next slide and just say that thank all of you for coming here today. And we talked a lot about strategies. We looked at community. We looked at student-to-student interaction and even talked about level differences. The big point I'd like to leave you with here today is that class size is not a barrier to communication. Whether you have 20 students or 60 students, communication, interaction can be part of your class. You can have a dynamic, communicative, interactive classroom no matter how big it is. So I'd like to finish with those words that don't let your class size prevent you from doing these types of activities, because you can do amazing things with a large class, and I think your students will really love it. So thank you all for coming today. Thank you for sharing so much. I loved all of your ideas and input, and I hope you have a wonderful Halloween, no matter what part of the world you're in. And thank you again.
Thank you so much, Dieter. What a great session. And I'm seeing so many comments and positive feedback from everyone that people have been